Frey, the male fertility god, right over the bedchamber door. If you have a close look at it in a minute, I hope you're not offended. Okay?
All right.
So anyway, one of the Viking gods was Thor. And Thor has this magic hammer, Mjolnir. And that hammer, in the hands of Thor, is the defender of the realm of the gods. Okay? That's what's going to protect Asgard from the giants that Thor so likes fighting. Anyway, well, how he got the hammer is a different story completely. But on any account, he got the hammer, and it was a result of Loki cutting off Thor's wife's hair, Sif, because Sif had beautiful long golden hair to reach the floor. So like I say, that's a different story. Well, anyway, Thor woke up one morning and the hammer was missing. So he figured he knew what happened to it. That god of mischief, that Loki, he went and stole that. So he hurried forth at once, and when he found Loki, he grabbed it and gave it a good shaking and said, "Where's my hammer?" But Loki was as surprised as Thor to hear that the hammer was missing, and he assured Thor that he didn't have it, but he said, "I bet I know this too." So Thor said, "Fair enough then, find it." So he went and seen fair Freya, and he borrowed from her feather cloak, and he put it on, and he changed himself into a hawk, and he flew north out of Asgard, the realm of the gods, and north. And when he was flying over giant land, he seen Thrym, the ruler of the frost giants, outside of his hall, sitting on a little hillock. And Loki lands and doesn't even have a chance to take his own form, and Thrym says, "Greetings, Loki from Asgard." Loki takes his own form and says, "Greetings, Thrym." And Thrym said, "How goes things with the gods?" Loki said, "It goes but ill with the gods." "Is that so?" said Thrym. "Yes," said Loki. "Whatever could be the matter?" said Thrym. "Well," said Loki, "Thor has lost his magic hammer." "Is that so?" said Thrym. "Yes," said Loki, "and not only that, but we fear it's stolen." "Is that so?" said Thrym. "Yes," said Loki, "and not only that, but I fear you have it." Well, Thrym let loose with thunderous laughter, tears rolling down his cheeks. And when he was able to regain himself, he looked at Loki and he said, "Yes, I do have it. And I have it buried 9 miles beneath the earth, so as you or no other god will ever lay eye on it again." "Well," said Loki, "is there some payment you would like for the hammer?" "No," said Thrym, "no payment." "Well," said Loki, "is there some gift you would like for the hammer?" Well, Thrym stopped for a while and he said, "Well, I have heard much talk about the most beautiful of all the goddesses, fair Freya. And if the gods would give her as my bride, then I will give the hammer as the bride price." Well, Loki said to himself, "There's a small chance of that," because he knew what Freya was like. But anyway, he looked at Thrym and he said, "Thrym, this is an important matter, one which I cannot decide." Well, of course, Thrym knew that. So Loki changed himself back into a hawk again, and he flew south out of giant land. And when he was flying over Asgard, Thor was outside pacing up and down in front of his hall, and he seen the dot on the sky that he knew was Loki. So he started to roar, "What news, Loki? What news of my hammer?" Loki said, "Hold on, Thor, wait a minute." He landed, took his own form, and Thor said, "Well, what news of my hammer?" "Well," said Loki, "I have found your hammer." "Well," said Thor, "where is it?" Loki said, "Thrym, the ruler of the frost giants, has it, and he has it buried 9 miles beneath the earth." "Well," said Thor, "did you offer him payment for the hammer?" He said, "Of course I did." And he refused. "Well," said Thor, "did you offer him gifts for the hammer?" And he said, "Of course I did. And he wants Freya as his bride." "Well," said Thor, "what are we waiting for? Let's hurry forth at once and tell her." "Hold on," said Loki. "What makes you so sure that Freya would want to be married off to one of the ugly giants? And how about her husband Ad? What's he going to have to say about it?" "Well," said Thor, I hadn't thought of that." But Loki, being one for mischief, says, "Well, there can be no harm in asking." So off they go to Freya's hall, and she gives him a warm welcome, and they go inside and they talk for a while, probably about stuff like the weather and things like that. And then she looked at him and she asked him what their business was. And he told her. And she flew into a rage. How dare you enter my hall and utter such words? And not only that, how dare you even listen to him in the first place? So she's in a rage. And Loki takes her aside and he says, Freya, this is an important matter. One for all the gods to decide. So to this she agrees. And off they go to Odin's hall. And when all the gods and goddesses had assembled, the discussion begins. And it goes on for a few days and has got nowhere. And Heimdall, the gatekeeper on the Rainbow Bridge, okay? After a while, he had enough of it. And he looked at Thor and he said, well, Thor, it's your hammer, so why don't you go get it back? Thor looked at me and he said, it's all right for you, Heimdall, but I fear that if I go to Giantland without my hammer, I shall be struck down dead. Heimdall said, I don't mean for you to go just as a warrior, Thor. I mean for you to go just as a bride. Thor said, me, Thor of the Aesir, dress in bridal garb? Now he's in a rage. Loki takes him aside and he says, Thor, would you prefer if the giants in their numbers came here to Asgard and slaughtered us all? Because without the hammer we shall surely be slaughtered. And he said, not only that, if you go dressed as a bride, I will go dressed as your handmaiden. So reluctantly, Thor is dressed as a bride. And his girdle reaches the floor. And about his girdle there hung a bunch of jangling household keys. And he has his big fiery red beard shaved off. And they're putting the veil on. When Thor looks around Asgard at the rest of the gods and goddesses, and he said, if any of you laugh now, the laugh shall be short-lived. Anyway, he's completely dressed when fair Freya comes forward with her necklace, Brasingaman, and that's another story how she got that one too, okay? But in any account, nothing sparkles like Brasingaman, and she took it off, grieving though she was, to part with it for any amount of time. She placed it down over Thor's neck, and out the door goes Thor and Loki, and they climb into Thor's chariot pulled by his two goats, Toot Grinder and Toot Gnasher, and across the sky they ride. And Thrym is again out sitting on his hillock when he sees the glisten in the day's sky that can be none other than Brasingaman. So that's when he hollered out to his servants and he said, bedeck the halls, for Freya comes, love's goddess as my bride. And the servants strew fresh reeds and rushes on the floor and prepared the bridal feast. The chariot lands, and Thrym walks over, and he holds out his hand to help the fair Freya down. And when Thor puts his hand in there, Thrym looks at it and says, what a hand! What a hand, and what a woman befitting a giant like myself. So he escorts Thor and Loki into his hall, and they assume the correct seating position, and the feast begins. Thor wolfs down 1 ox and 8 barrels of salmon and a vat of ale. And Thrym said, never before have I seen a woman with such an appetite. Then cunning Loki spoke up. He said, for 8 long nights and 8 long days she has not ate, for she longed to come to Giantland. Now, this pleased Thrym to no end, and he was sitting back in his high seat, admiring his own good fortune, when he decides that he would like a kiss from the fair Freya. So he reaches over for the haul aside the veil and give her a kiss, and when he does, Thor glares at him and lightning bolts fly out of Thor's eyes. Thrym falls back and says, fire flies from her eyes! Then cunning Loki spoke up again. He said, for 8 long nights and 8 long days she has not slept, for she longed to come to Giantland. Well, Thrym is even more pleased than before. And then his sister steps forward, and she walks in front of Thor, and she says, fair Freya, have you not a gift for me, sister of the groom, as is the bridal custom? But before Thor has a chance to answer, Thrym says, wait, sister, first I have a gift. And he hollered out to the servants. He said, bring in the hammer now. And the servants bring in the hammer. You got to watch the gift giving, okay? Because that's the giant. So the hammer is brought in, and Thrym takes it and he brings it over and he puts it in Thor's laps. And he looked at Thor and he said, "See, Freya, do I, Thrym, not always honour my pledges?" He said, "You may keep this hammer, or you may send it back to the gods. The decision is yours." Thor took his hand, put it around the handle, and he rejoiced deep down in his heart. And he stands up, and he raises the hammer high, and with one mighty blow he laid Thrym low. All hell breaks loose in Giant Land that day, but that is how the son of Odin, Thor, got his hammer back from the giants.